Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Sickle Cell Action Network, a weekly internet radio show presented by Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative and sponsored by Mass Therapeutics. We're coming to you live from Indianapolis, Indiana, and we're here to serve you by providing up-to-date information and opinion on all matters pertaining to sickle cell disease. My name is Gary A. Gibson, and I am your host for the next 2 hours. Let me start by saying that I don't have sickle cell disease, nor do I carry the sickle cell trait. In spite of that, I am no stranger to sickle cell. Quite the contrary. You see, even though I don't have sickle cell, it's had a very huge impact on my life. That's true because its complications took my wife from me after 12 years of marriage. It also caused her to have a miscarriage that resulted in the loss of our twin babies that she was carrying while in a sickle cell crisis. So all told, sickle cell has taken 3 lives from me, and I feel the pain of those losses every single day. I currently serve as the president and CEO of Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative, a community-based organization that has been serving people with sickle cell for over 45 years. Each day, I attempt to transform the pain of my losses into positive energy that is focused on making a difference for those who are battling sickle cell. From being involved with sickle cell for over 40 years, I'm able to say that much progress has been made, but there is still so much work to do. This show is an opportunity to contribute to the ever-expanding dialogue about sickle cell that is taking place all around the world. Our show is about raising awareness, but it is also about so much more. I like to say that sickle cell awareness is important, but we need more than awareness. Those living with sickle cell are already aware. That makes me ask, so what are we doing for them? My answer is, not enough. That's why we've named this show the Sickle Cell Action Network, because awareness without action has very little impact. We want this show to be a source of information and a call to action to help those who must live with sickle cell in their midst. We have designed the show to provide information that is beneficial to patients, caregivers, family members, and friends alike. Most importantly, we want people with sickle cell to know and understand that they are not alone. The Sickle Cell Action Network show features live guests who are healthcare providers, patients, advocates, and others who are engaged in the fight to eradicate sickle cell and ease its burden on those it affects. Today, we're pleased to speak with one of the few people in the world who can actually say that she has been cured of sickle cell. We're honored to have Kamia Quinones via telephone today to talk to us about her unique experience of knowing what it's like to live with and without sickle cell. We're serious about sharing valuable information, and we hope that you will join us every week, same time, same station. If you've missed some of our previous editions or wish that you could listen to them again, don't worry. Just go to the Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative YouTube page, and you'll find them there. Now, let's get on with our show, and we'll start with this week's edition of Sickle Cell News Update. Really good news coming out today, and today I think is going to be our good news day. The first story that I want to share with you, I think is my lead-in story is called Report on Sickle Cell Disease Suggests that Current State of Treatment and Care is Inadequate and Improvements Are Needed. And the heading is the American Society of Hematology is partnering with other organizations in the sickle cell disease community to launch the Sickle Cell Disease Coalition and call for action to improve the state of care. And so the way it reads is this: in an effort to identify unmet medical needs for people with sickle cell disease, the American Society of Hematology, along with other groups, issued the State of Sickle Cell Disease 2016 report, evaluating the disease in 4 primary areas: access to care, training and professional education, research and clinical trials, and global health. The report shows that significant improvements are needed across all areas, and that though patients are living longer, the system of care needs to change to ensure a better quality of life. To address these challenges, ASH launched the Sickle Cell Disease Coalition along with more than 20 other organizations who are issuing a call to action that will amplify the voice of the sickle cell disease community, promote sickle cell disease awareness, and transform sickle cell disease care both in the United States and around the globe. Not only are individuals with sickle cell burdened by the pain and disability that comes with a chronic condition, but they also have very few accessible treatment options due to our fragmented healthcare system, said ASH President Charles S. Abrams, MD, of the University of Pennsylvania. This status quo is unacceptable, and we are setting out to change it. ASH is proud to make a difference for people battling this disease worldwide by teaming up with partners from around the globe to launch the Sickle Cell Disease Coalition. ASH hosted a press conference on September 6th in Washington, D.C. to discuss the findings of the report and issue the coalition's global call to action on sickle cell disease. These efforts are supported by leading patient advocacy groups, people with sickle cell disease and their families, researchers, clinicians, policymakers, industry stakeholders, and foundations. Together, these groups are pledging their collective efforts to improve care, early diagnosis, treatment, and research. ASH and its partners have identified several ways to help address the priority areas in this report. These include access to care, developing evidence-based guidelines and coordinated healthcare delivery models to ensure that individuals with sickle cell can access quality care regardless of age, location, and socioeconomic status. Training and education, increasing the number of providers who are able to care for those with sickle cell by educating established clinicians to treat symptoms and complications while encouraging medical trainees to pursue careers in SCD care. Research and clinical trials, investing in strategies to expand use of existing treatments, developing novel therapies, and strengthening curative options while accelerating their discovery. And finally, global areas, global issues, expanding newborn screening and early intervention programs, increasing sickle cell awareness and education, and improving access to quality care in developing regions. In addition to these priorities, ASH has not only committed to developing and implementing up-to-date guidelines describing the management of acute and chronic complications of sickle cell, but to also educate healthcare providers in all settings to recognize and properly respond to sickle cell symptoms in their everyday practices. Targeted professionals include hematologists, primary care providers, and hospitalists. The Society is also working closely with the Emergency Department Sickle Cell Care Coalition to support their efforts to improve emergency care of individuals with sickle cell. So we want to say thank you to ASH for their leadership in this area, releasing the report on the state of sickle cell. I have seen the report, and I will tell you that they are all very serious about the areas that need improvement, and I'm glad to see that ASH has not only made the statement, but they have taken the effort to put together a coalition that is growing as we speak of people and organizations all aimed at trying to improve the sickle cell community care. Our next story is also good news, and this is coming to us from Los Angeles. This we will actually talk next week with Mary Brown, who is the director of the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California, because they had a hand in this. And this story, the headline is MLK Jr. Outpatient Center for Adults with Sickle Cell Disease. And the article reads, California's Sickle Cell Data Collection Program is pleased to announce that the Los Angeles Department of Health Services is opening a new sickle cell disease clinic September 1st. The clinic will fill a major gap in expert healthcare services for over 1,000 Los Angelino adults with sickle cell disease who are not only African American, but also Hispanic, South Asian, and of Middle Eastern descent. The clinic, housed in the MLK Outpatient Center, will be open Monday through Friday with a special sickle cell disease focus Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 5 p.m. In response to the great need in Los Angeles, where a majority of California adults with sickle cell disease live, the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California is proud to announce that LA County Department of Health Services will be offering clinical services specifically tailored to meet the needs of adults with SCD at the MLK Outpatient Center. The clinic, due to the loss of treatment centers and skilled healthcare providers, life expectancy is now under 40 years of age among Los Angeles adults with sickle cell. This is despite advances in care through new medications and gene therapy nationally. We know that there is a large community of adults with sickle cell in the neighborhood served by MLK Jr. Outpatient Center, said Ellen Rothman, the Chief Medical Officer at MLK Jr. Outpatient Center. We are planning an innovative and collaborative approach to provide not just specialty hematology, but also primary care, mental health services, comprehensive pain management, including alternative therapies, and peer navigators. We are working with our campus partners, the Department of Mental Health and the MLK Community Hospital, to provide the whole spectrum of services. There has been no sickle cell clinic at MLK since former U.S. Surgeon General David Satcher's Sickle Cell Disease Research Center at the former King Drew Medical Center closed decades ago. This is a sorely needed community resource. The development of multidisciplinary sickle cell disease services at MLK was initiated by the Pacific Regional Sickle Cell Collaborative, a new federal project that is introducing a regional approach to expand healthcare access for patients throughout 8 western United States. Principal investigator Diane J. Nugent, MD, founding president of the Center for Inherited Blood Disorders in Orange County, California, states, "The loss of care for patients with sickle cell over the past 2 decades is a healthcare tragedy and is a consequence of our system's lack of recognition and support for the interdisciplinary teams needed to support families and patients with complex chronic disease." The new MLK services are at one of many new sites needed throughout Southern California to improve outcomes and quality of life for all patients. Adults with sickle cell disease deserve healthcare providers that understand the disease, its complications, and their pain. Knowing the MLK staff planning and providing the services gives me great confidence they will meet the community's needs, states Mary Brown, President and CEO of the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California, the lead community-based organization in the collaborative. And as I said, we will be speaking with Mary next week, and this is great news. And finally, more good news. Gene therapy for sickle cell disease passes key preclinical trial test. And the story reads, a precision-engineered gene therapy virus inserted into blood stem cells that are then transplanted markedly reduced sickle cell-induced red cell damage in mice with sickle cell disease. Researchers from Dana-Farber Boston Children's Cancer and Blood Disorders Center report today in the Journal of Clinical Investigation. The work sets the stage for bringing a decades-old discovery about sickle cell disease to the bedside. A clinical gene therapy trial using a virus rendered harmless in the laboratory is expected to launch in the coming year. Sickle cell disease, of course, is caused by mutation in hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying protein in red blood cells, which causes the usually pliant cells to stiffen and assume a curved or sickle shape. These sickle cells live for less time than those with healthy hemoglobin, leading to anemia. They also bind together, leading to blood flow blockage that can cause severe pain and organ damage throughout the body. The new gene therapy is the culmination of research going back to the 1980s that found that sickle cell disease is milder in people whose red blood cells carry a fetal form of hemoglobin. Fetal hemoglobin normally tails off after birth, but in 2008, Dana-Farber Boston Children's researchers Stuart Orkin and Vijay Sankaran showed that suppressing a gene called BCL11A, which acts as an off switch, could restart fetal hemoglobin production. In 2011, using this approach, they corrected sickle cell disease in mice, replacing much of the defective beta hemoglobin that causes sickling with fetal hemoglobin. So the story goes on a little bit further, but the gist of the story is that we are getting closer and closer to a full-scale clinical trial for gene editing or gene therapy when it comes to sickle cell disease, and that is good news. Glad to share all of this good news with you today. When we come back, we're going to share some other good news about a person who has been cured of sickle cell, and we're looking forward to speaking with her. This is the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host, and we'll be back.
Therapeutics is leading the way in developing treatments for sickle cell disease. We're proud to sponsor the Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative in its mission to provide leadership, education, and support services to the sickle cell community.
Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network Show. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host, and I am really happy that we have a tremendous guest today. I've been speaking with her, actually had the pleasure of meeting her at the Mass Therapeutics conference on sickle cell last week. I think it was last Thursday in New York. And this young woman was there, and she has a tremendous story to share with you today. And it is my pleasure to introduce you all to Kamia Quinones. Kamia lives in Gary, Indiana. And Kamia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you
All right. What I usually do is ask my guests to tell people about themselves, just so people get a sense for who you are. So I'm going to ask you, where were you born? How old are you? And what type of sickle cell did you have? Most of the time I'm asking what type of sickle cell do you have. This time I get to say, what type of sickle cell did you have? All right. So, were you the only one in your immediate family, brothers and sisters, mother, father, whatever, that had sickle cell? If not, would you tell us, if so, or if not? I mean, would you tell us who else has it?
Actually, I was not. My oldest sister, there's four of us. I'm the youngest, and there's two middle children, and then my oldest sister, she also had the disease. But I also had, a great aunt, cousin, but as far as immediate family, it was only my sister and I.
Okay, and is your sister still with us?
Yes, she is.
Okay, and how old is she?
She is...
About?
How old my sister is. She's about 42.
Okay.
42.
Okay, so she's about 6 years older than you are.
Yes.
And what type of sickle cell does she have?
She also has that.
Okay. So, our show today is about being cured from sickle cell, but before we talk about that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how sickle cell affected you before the transplant. And the first thing I'd like to ask is, when were you diagnosed with sickle cell?
Okay, I was diagnosed at the age of 2. And like I said, because my older sister already had the disease prior to my birth, my mom, I guess, already knew what to look for, the signs and everything. So, I was taken to the doctor, to blood tests, and, the whole regimen they put you through, and I was diagnosed then at the age of 2.
So it's about at that time that you started having symptoms, or do you know if it was before that?
I believe it was around that age, if I remember correctly, from what my mother tells me. Around the age of 2.
Okay.
And the symptoms started.
That's one of the interesting things about sickle cell that a lot of people don't realize, is that it sometimes doesn't manifest or show up until a little bit later in life. And it confuses people, because they think, well, if you're born with it, why don't you always show symptoms? But you don't always show symptoms until anywhere from six months or more before you start showing symptoms. And we'd like people to know a little bit more about sickle cell so they can understand that. And the reason, of course, for that is because it depends on when the body stops making the fetal hemoglobin. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your childhood with sickle cell, Kamia, if you don't mind. What was it like for you growing up with sickle cell?
Well, growing up, it was always a little rough, knowing that I couldn't do the same things that other children were able to do. Simple tasks as, going out snow day, or, playing in the snow, going out on recess when it's too hot, overexertion, running around. Those are the things that I was not able to do. However, I think because I had an older sister, it made it just a little bit easy, because I wouldn't say easy, it made it a little bit bearable, because my older sister couldn't do those things either, so I always kind of had like a buddy.
Yeah.
That, when the kids were playing outside, her and I would stay in and, do different things inside. But I mean, it was still tough, because she's, like you said, 7 years older than I am. Once she was gone, I was alone again. So,
Right.
I would look out the window and see the kids playing outside, and, if I had a cold or something, it wasn't just a cold. It would always be a trigger to something greater, like a sickle cell crisis. So my mom would always be really careful about what I did, when I did it, and different things like that.
And I think, you touched on something that, for people that don't have sickle cell, that we want to care about sickle cell, what's that feeling like when you're sitting there watching the kids play?
It's heart-wrenching, because as a child you're thinking, why me? Why can't I go out and play with my friends? Why can't I, enjoy the snow? Things that people take for granted.
Right.
As a child, you don't think that, I can go outside. Of course, you're ready for those snow days. You're ready for the summer. You're ready for the hot weather. You're ready to run around. But, and as a kid, you just, I don't know if I fully comprehend why I couldn't. I always felt somewhat of a punishment. Even though my mom always tried to make up for it, she always tried to give me different things I can do inside. She was always very supportive. But it still wasn't the same as being able to go out and play. And, and as a child, you just felt like you were being punished for something that you had no control over.
Right.
And it's not a very good feeling at all.
Right, well, I know it, and that's basically what I wanted you to say, because there's a lot of people that just don't understand the impact. It's not just physical. It is a full impact on the individual. So, Kamia, how much do you remember about the type of medical care that you were receiving as a child? And if so, can you share some of your experiences with us from what you remember?
Sure. So I remember being hospitalized sometimes, again, with my buddy, my sister Keisha. We would sometimes share the same hospital room. I remember getting stuck a lot, with the needles. I remember just being in the hospital room, just ready to go home and ready to just get back to normal life. And I just remember feeling like, why me? Feeling like something was missing from my childhood, so to speak. And I don't know, I just remember being in a lot of pain. You never forget the pain, no matter how old you get. No matter how many years it's been, no matter how much time has passed in between crises, you never forget the pain. And that's something that I probably remember the most. Sometimes being outside and playing and coming inside and hurting. And my mom taking me to the emergency room at 3 a.m.
Right.
Those are things that I remember.
Right. So, I ask this question a lot too, just because we get slightly different answers. But again, for those that aren't as familiar with sickle cell that might be listening, how do you describe that pain?
Oh, wow. It's so hard to put into words. I mean, again, I've said this before, I would never downplay childbirth. I would never, ever downplay childbirth. But the pain from sickle cell is a lot worse than childbirth. But it's concentrated in certain areas like your knees or your back, and it's just this debilitating pain that every time your heart beats, the pain intensifies. It's like a burning, oh my goodness, I don't know. It's so hard to put into words how bad that pain feels.
And thankfully, you don't have to feel it anymore.
Yes, so thankful.
So, how did sickle cell affect you as an adolescent then? So you've gone through your childhood, you've had all those hospitalizations and all that pain, and again, based on who the individual is, sickle cell affects everybody a little bit differently, and some people have more trouble as they get older, some people seem to have a little less trouble as they get older. What happened with you? As you got older, did you have more trouble?
I think as I got older, especially during adolescent teenage years, actually it slowed down a bit for me.
Okay.
Because I remember going years for a while without being hospitalized. In high school, I can remember very few times that I had to go to the hospital or had crisis that maybe I couldn't deal with at home. So I think from my childhood, it was slightly less as a teenager than,
And then as you got into adulthood, did things change any?
Yes, that's when things started to get worse. So I guess what I would contribute to is the stress of life, trying to go to college, trying to be a productive adult, becoming a mom, nursing school, of course, being married, just the everyday stress of life can easily trigger a crisis. And so as I began to experience those things, as a normal person wouldn't think twice about, those things began to affect my sickle cell.
So you mentioned that you're a nurse. Did you always want to be a nurse, and did having sickle cell have anything to do with you wanting to be a nurse?
I always knew I wanted to be in the medical field, but as a child, I always tell the story about this nurse that I had. My mom was a single parent. She raised all four of us alone, just her, but she had to work, she had 3 other children to take care of. So when I was in the hospital, I went to the same hospital, so it was like family, and it was this nurse, she passed on now, her name was Candy, and she would give me the best care. I mean, she would go the extra mile, stay after, her hours were complete to play games with me until my mom had gotten off of work, or, bringing little snacks and just doing little things to make me feel better.
Oh, that's nice.
So I always remember her, and that kind of pushed me toward being a nurse. And also I have a family of nurses, my aunt, my cousin, both my sisters.
Okay.
And so that kind of pushed me.
Cool. So there's a lot of nursing in your family, and that helps push you. Okay. So as a nurse, you ever cared for anybody with sickle cell yourself?
Not directly. However, when I was going through my clinical process, I was able to follow a nurse in the emergency room, and a little girl who I'm guessing was about 8 or 9 came in, screaming in pain, and in my head I kind of figured what it was about. She was kind of kneeling onto her leg. Her mom was holding her, trying to get her to stop crying, and before the nurse could say anything, I had already pictured in my mind what it was. And so the nurse was explaining to me, this child has sickle cell, and I'm thinking to myself, I know all too well
Right.
what this child is going through.
Right.
And it broke my heart, it broke my heart to see this little kid just crying her eyes out, and there was really nothing her mom could do. You could see the worry on her mom's face, and, I just felt horrible, for her. But, that was probably the closest that I've ever come to actually caring for a patient.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question, I think, and then we'll go to a break. So being a nurse who is a sickle cell patient might make you even more compassionate when you're treating other patients, does it? And if so, would you explain how and why that is true?
Absolutely. I believe it makes me more compassionate because I've been there. There's nothing like being on the other side of that bed. And I can remember times where I didn't receive the care that I should have received. And, people were being mean sometimes and just not doing what I felt that they should and ignoring the pain. And I just knew that when I'm on the other side of that bed, I know what I'm going to give my patient. I learned what not to do by being a sickle cell patient. I also learned that when you're laying in bed, you're vulnerable. So my patients are vulnerable, and they look for someone who can honestly care for them. And so that's what I want to give to each and every one of my patients.
That is wonderful. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue speaking with Kamia Quinones about her life living with sickle cell, and then we're going to start getting into the experience of the cure. This is the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show, and I am Gary A. Gibson, your host. Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host, and we are speaking with the awesome Kamia Quinones about being cured from sickle cell disease. And we're going to pick up right where we left off, but we're going to shift just a little bit into the actual topic about being cured. And let's talk, Kamia, about your stem cell transplant now. Although the number of stem cell transplant patients is growing, it still represents just a fraction of the overall sickle cell population, and I think that makes you a rather rare individual. What is it like to be someone who has been cured from sickle cell?
Well, it's like receiving a second chance at life. It's like having a burden lifted off of your shoulder, off of your life, like a hole has been lifted off your life, and like the chains has been broken. You're free to just be whoever you want to be instead of having all these limitations that were put on your life because of the disease. So I feel like I can conquer the world now. Before I had these limitations that would hold me back from doing certain things.
I'm still just trying to imagine that, living with it for 30-some years, and then all of a sudden that burden is gone. That's incredible. It's got to be an incredible feeling.
It's amazing. I still can't really put it into words. It's an awesome feeling. Yeah, I feel free. Free.
I understand. So, would you explain to our audience what being cured from sickle cell really means? Does it mean that you no longer have any sickle cell pain crises?
That is correct. I have not had a pain crisis, and actually next month, on the 24th, it will be 3 years. So I have not had a sickle cell crisis since then, or any complications from sickle cell since my transplant 3 years ago.
So no pain and no complications since the transplant.
None.
Wow. What else does being cured from sickle cell mean? In other words, if we were to have your blood screened now, does it mean that your blood type is no longer going to show up as hemoglobin SS?
That is correct. However, my brother did have a trait, so now it shows, my blood work shows that I'm a carrier, that I have the trait.
Okay, you faded out a little bit there.
I'm sorry.
Let's see here. Can you repeat that?
Right. So, because my brother Patrick was a carrier, he had the trait. Since he was my donor, I now have the trait. So
Okay.
that's what my blood work would show.
Okay.
That I'm a carrier, that I have the trait.
Gotcha. And so it seems to me that making the decision to undergo the transplant procedure was probably a pretty complex one. Was it?
No.
No?
Really.
No?
I mean, of course it took some in-depth thinking, but if someone is going to hand you your life, or a new lease on life, I mean, of course you're going to question that all the side effects. As a nurse, I did my research. I prayed. I covered all the bases that I figured I should cover. But then I took this chance and I ran with it. And not just for me. I was, as a patient, you rely on so many people. My husband, would have to run me to the hospital at 3 a.m. My mom, would have to take care of my kids or come up to the hospital to see me. And my children I remember sometimes when we ride past the hospital, even just riding past, they would begin to cry, thinking mommy had to leave again.
Oh.
So I felt that it wasn't just for me, which of course all the benefits are awesome for me, but my family will benefit as well. So when I had this chance, I knew I had to take it.
Okay, so where did you have the procedure performed, and why did you choose them?
So the procedure was performed at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I chose them actually because I saw my husband had been doing some research on transplants years ago when it wasn't
Okay. So you saw that somebody else had been cured, and I remember seeing that story myself. And you saw that and you said, hey, this is maybe for me. Let me give it a try. So you gave him a call. What happened next?
What happened next is they set up an appointment, and maybe a couple weeks later, maybe a week and a half later, I was in the doctor's office, and Dr. Soroff, who is one of the most genuine people I've ever met, sat down with me, explained everything that what they wanted to do or what would happen if I was chosen, because there was this process that needed to happen before I could be a part of the study. And told me what I needed to do, all the steps I needed to take, and we went from there.
And so once you had that initial consultation with the doctor, you were like ready to go, right?
Right, and of course I was still nervous. You know, I came home, my mom and my husband both went with me, my biggest support system, my mom and my husband. And so we came back home, we talked about it. Of course I was nervous, but, you know, I was willing to put all that aside to say, hey, this is for me. You know, this is for me, I'm ready.
Okay. So you had what is known as an allogenic stem cell transplant, right?
Correct.
And that means that your donor was a genetically similar individual, not identical, but genetically similar. And in your case, it was your brother, and you mentioned that. But would you please tell us about how the process of having your brother donate his stem cells came to be? Did he have to be talked into doing it, or was it something that took place pretty easily?
No, actually it took place pretty easily. Both of my siblings, that I told you I had two,
right.
the middle siblings, once they heard this, they were so supportive. I've always had a really close-knit family.
Okay.
My brothers and sisters, my mom, they've always been supportive of anything that I wanted to do. So we've always been pretty close. When they heard this, they were really excited. And so they both were tested right away. And my aunt, who's a nurse, she actually drew the blood. And they sent it in, and my sister was not a match, but my brother was.
Okay.
And it's actually, you have to match, I believe, 10 markers of your antigens in order for it to be a match, and my brother was a match for all 10.
Wow. So that was a good sign and off to a good start.
Yes, it was.
Once you decided to undergo the procedure, what mental steps did you have to take to get ready for it? You've talked a little bit about being a little bit nervous, and again, you're confronted with, well, this could possibly happen, that could possibly happen, this complication, that complication. So it seems to me, and that's why I asked earlier if it was a complex decision, because you have to think about those things. So from that standpoint, what mental steps did you have to undergo?
Like I mentioned before, my support system has always been amazing. From my best friends to my mom and my siblings, they're all pushing me to, hey, you got this, And so when you have a foundation like that, it's pretty easy for you to make decisions knowing that no matter what happens, they're always going to be there to have your back no matter what.
Absolutely.
And so once they told me all this, of course, like I said, I was afraid, worried, not afraid, just a little concerned, a little nervous. And so I began to pray. My mom's a praying woman, and she believes, hey, God got you. And, I spoke with my husband. I let my children know what was going to happen. My oldest sister, who also has gone through the disease, they knew how severe it had started to affect my life. I was in the hospital every 4 to 6 weeks like clockwork, and it had really began to take a toll on me. And so all my support system, they rallied around me and said, you know what, you can do this. It's time. It's time for you to live the life that you deserve. So I decided, let's do it.
I remember hearing, I think you say in New York, that you really got to the point where you were really, how do I say it? I don't want to say you were ready to give up on life, but something like that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I felt I knew that I had come to terms that this disease was going to take my life. You know, the complications had started to become a big factor. You know, being in the hospital every 4 to 6 weeks, like I said, it began to take a toll on my body, physically and mentally. And so you come to a point where you say, you know what, I just have to accept that this is going to happen. You know, that I'm literally going to die from this disease. You know, and I would always joke with my husband, you know, when I die, do this. And he would say, you know, don't talk like that. And it's like, well, I've accepted that this disease is going to take my life. You know, I had come to terms that this is going to happen. This is going to kill me. So, and that kind of put me in a dark place for a while. But after I accepted it, it was like, hey, you know, I've accepted it. This is what's going to happen. I'm just going to carry on with the life that I have right now.
Well, I can actually picture and feel all of that, and definitely we thank you and appreciate you for sharing that information. We're going to take another break right now, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the details of what you went through, and then the results. So if you just stay with us, we'll be back. This is the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show, and I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host. Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host, and we're having a great conversation with a young lady named Kamia Quinones in Gary, Indiana, and she's speaking to us by phone. Very, very appreciative of her taking the time to share her story with us, and we'll get back to that in just a moment, but first we certainly want to remind you that the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet radio show is sponsored by Mass Therapeutics, a publicly traded biopharmaceutical company headquartered in San Diego, California. MAST is currently leveraging the molecular adhesion and sealant technology platform derived from over 2 decades of clinical, non-clinical, and manufacturing experience with purified and non-purified polaxamers. MAST has developed a drug called MST-188 as a candidate for serious or life-threatening diseases with significant unmet needs. Among those needs is the treatment of sickle cell disease. MAST has enrolled sickle cell patients in a clinical trial known as EPIC. EPIC stands for Evaluation of Purified Polaxamer in Crisis. If successful, EPIC could result in the first treatment of its kind to treat sickle cell disease patients while they are in crisis. The EPIC study aims to determine whether MST-188 can shorten the duration of a painful crisis. MST-188 is an investigational drug that has not been approved for commercial sale in any jurisdiction for any use. MST-188 potentially improves oxygen delivery, and it may help keep blood vessels from becoming blocked and more obstructed. It may improve blood flow by stopping cells from grouping together. It also may reduce inflammation, and it may restore cell membranes and give damaged cells time to heal. EPIC participants continue to receive their normal pain treatments during crisis, and their participation has been free of charge to them. The patients involved in the EPIC study may not only be helping themselves, but they might also be helping future generations of those yet to be born. If you are interested in learning more about the EPIC study, please visit www.theepicstudy.com. And as a sidebar, in New York last week, MAST held its 5th annual Sickle Cell Investors Conference, and they brought together members from the sickle cell community, doctors, and other people or other pharmaceutical companies who are also working on products to help people with sickle cell disease. So MAST is clearly a leader in this area, and in fact they are also one of the first companies to sign on to the American Society of Hematology Sickle Cell Coalition that I referenced in our news report earlier today. We are speaking with Kamia Quinones, and we are having a great conversation. She's sharing her life, and we appreciate that, and we're going to come back to her right now. We're going to start with this question, Kamia. Depending upon the patient, chemotherapy and radiation treatment have to take place to prepare the body to receive the donor's stem cells. This is known as preparative regimen. Did you have to undergo both chemotherapy and radiation treatments prior to the procedure? And if so, how well did you tolerate these treatments?
So actually I did not have to receive the chemotherapy because my brother and I, we matched, like I said, on that 10-point marker scale that they use. So I did not have to do the chemotherapy. However, I did have to take a small dose of radiation, total body radiation, and they also used an immunosuppressive to, I guess, kind of stop. Well, it was meant to, so my body wouldn't reject my brother's cells. They wouldn't fight against his cells.
Right.
So about maybe 5 days before I was infused with his stem cells, I received a small dose every day for 5 days, and on the 5th day is when I received the total body radiation, and then the next day was the stem cells.
The total body radiation and the small doses you were getting, how was that applied? Was that by a machine? Was that applied by medication that you took, or what?
Right. So it was the immunosuppressive was through a line that was placed, central line that places a big vein in your chest that they use to place a line that will stay there for the duration of your hospital stay. That way, they don't have to give you a shot or stick you or
Right.
you every day to,
Right.
for the medication or blood draws that they need. So they would place this line at the beginning before you are hospitalized, actually. And so they would use that to infuse the immunosuppressant.
Kamia, so how long of a process was this? I mean, from start to finish, and how demanding was it on you physically and mentally?
So total, from beginning to end, the process, just the hospitalization, was approximately, I believe, 32 days. And for the first, like I said, 6 or 7 days when I was receiving the immunosuppressant and then the total body radiation, I was tired. It took a while for my body to adjust to what was going on, because anything new introduced to the body, of course, it's going to cause you to react certain ways. But after I received the stem cells, that's the biggest part, that first week when they're kind of suppressing your immune system so that you don't reject the new cells. Then after that, it's like waiting for your body to pretty much bounce back or accept the cells. So I was in the hospital for, like I said, about 32 days. The first week was probably the most intense. And then after that, it was just more of a waiting game for my body to start responding and accepting the cells.
And how do you feel? I mean, how did your body respond? Apparently it did respond because you went through the procedure and you're cured. But how did it? Was it hard? Or do you think it went a little easier than you were expecting?
I didn't know what to expect, and that's probably the biggest issue that I had is you don't know what to expect, because although doctors take you step by step, everyone reacts different to different things.
Right.
So they did prepare me for the most part of what would happen. This is going to happen. You're going to feel tired. You're going to feel this, and so I was pretty much prepared. But when you're laying in that bed, it's still, oh my goodness, what's coming next, and how's this going to make me feel with every new dose or every new medication you get? You're wondering, what's going to happen now? Is it going to make me sick? Is it going to make me better? But overall, I definitely would say it was nerve
Did the radiation and immunosuppressive therapy, did that make you sick?
It did. It did. I was nauseous, tired, but when I was in sickle cell crisis, I also experienced those things. You know, the medication that they give you makes you nauseated. So it wasn't really anything that I had experienced already. I spiked a small temp, but when I was in crisis, I had a temp. So it was nothing out of the ordinary or something that was just so major that I couldn't handle. It was more of the nausea, you're tired, you're feeling, a little bit down. Your body just going through so much. But it wasn't anything that I had experienced before.
You might even be able to say it was kind of a piece of cake based on what you'd been through. Not quite?
No, absolutely, because if I had to do it again, I would definitely do it again in a heartbeat. Anything to not feel that pain again. And I say this, that it was not worse. It wasn't anything compared to my worst sickle cell crisis.
Right. That's what I'm...
It was a piece of cake compared to my worst sickle cell crisis.
That's what I'm saying. Right. So basically, when a patient receives the donated stem cells, the process is pretty similar to just getting a blood transfusion. Do you remember how long it took you for you to actually receive your brother's stem cells?
You mean like total infusion time?
Yes, total infusion time, yes.
From what I remember, maybe a couple hours. I remember they started early that morning. Maybe by the late afternoon, it was complete. I don't believe it was an all-day thing. I mean, it was a while ago. But,
yeah, sure.
I don't remember it being an all-day thing. It was, like you said, like a blood transfusion. Of course, infusing blood takes over a few hours. So, from what I remember, it was about that.
Okay. Also, we're going to ask this question, and we're going to take another break, but engraftment is the term that doctors use to describe the point when the stem cells start doing their job and the blood cell counts start to rise. Do you remember or know how long that took in your case?
So, like I said, I was in the hospital for about 30 days. At the end of that 30 days, the doctors said that they had started to see the donor cells, which rise, which is what they want. They want my cells to decrease and my brother's cells to increase. So when I was discharged, they began to see those numbers begin to change. And of course, after I was discharged, the numbers were still fluctuating. So it wasn't as fast as I'd like, but over time it did happen.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll start heading towards the end of the interview. But definitely thank you again, Kamia, for spending time with us and sharing your story with the hopes that it can help somebody else experience what you've experienced. This is the Sickle Cell Action Network show. I'm Gary Gibson, your host, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. I'm Gary Gibson here on Tuesday, September 13th, 2016, coming to you live from Indianapolis, Indiana, speaking on the phone with Kamia Quinones from Gary, Indiana. And again, I'm very, very happy and appreciative that Kamia has taken her time to be with us today. Kamia, we were talking about the process with the transplant, and we've talked about the immunosuppressive therapy and radiation and all of those different things. And we've talked about the actual infusion of the stem cells. We've talked about engraftment, which is when the new cells start to take effect and start building in your body, etc. So let's go to the next question, which is, after the transplant procedure was over, what happened next? How did you feel?
Okay, so after the 30 days of being hospitalized, you get to go home, but you are started on an anti-rejection medication. Now, this medication you're supposed to take 6
Did you have to be extra careful in terms of where you would go or trying to limit your exposure to potential sources of infection?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They give you, well, they gave me this book of, the do's and don'ts. But I was so excited to see this second chance at life that I was not going to take any chances. So I wore a mask when I went out for the first couple of weeks. My husband had to travel for work. I actually packed up my kids and I, and we went to stay with my mom for a couple of weeks. And she, of course, was totally overprotective, wouldn't let me go anywhere, or wouldn't let anyone come in who she thought would,
Right.
would
Bring no germs in here. Yeah.
no germs, no germs. Even my children, when they will come home from school, hey, Ivy, before you go up and see your mom, go wash your hands, take off your shoes, and yeah, she had this whole regimen planned for me. So that I stayed with her for a couple of weeks after, and yeah, you want to be really careful because, I mean, this is something that doesn't happen often.
Right.
So you want to protect it with your life. I mean, it is my life.
Right.
So my support system around me knew that, hey, we have to protect this, we have to guard this. So yes, everyone was definitely extra careful.
Great. So there are a number of medical complications that can occur after a stem cell transplant like yours. Did you have any complications or side effects that you remember? Even with all the stuff you were doing to try to ensure that you didn't get infections or whatnot, did you have any problems?
So with the anti-rejection medicine, one of the side effects is your joints can be sore. So I think that was really the big thing that hindered me the most. Again, it was just soreness. It was nothing, absolutely nothing on the scale of sickle cell pain. It was more of a little bit of achiness, like in my ankles or my wrists. And there was just a side effect to the anti-rejection medication. Other than that, with the antibiotics that I was taking, it really wasn't anything that I was not protected against. So I didn't catch pneumonia or the flu.
Okay.
I really tried just to be extra careful.
Okay.
So
Good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Usually after a stem cell transplant, the patient will have to stay in the hospital for a period of time for monitoring and follow-up treatments. You said that you stayed there for about 30 days or so, around 30 days after the procedure, right?
yes, correct.
And what happened during that time? I mean, was it just laying around in the hospital, just getting tests done all the time, or what?
Like I said, for that first week, that first 7 days of the immunosuppressive, and then the radiation, and then the stem cells, that was probably the rough part. After that, it seemed more of a waiting game. Of course, it took my body time to recover from the radiation and being nauseous, being tired, just because of what the medication does to you. It's just regular side effects. I think the biggest part, the hardest part for me was they didn't allow children on the floor.
Oh, okay.
Because, kids can be dirty, and I completely, as a nurse, understand that. So as much as the role was state of the art, so I was able to Skype, my kids from the TV, and, we were able to video chat and things like that. But the hardest part was not being able to hold my children, not being able to hug them, not being able to, I could read them a story via Skype at night or help with their homework. It was nothing compared to having them there with me. So I believe that probably was the hardest part. As far as anything physical, like I said, it doesn't even begin to compare to the issues and the pain and the things that I had with the sickle cell crisis.
So after the procedure's over, you've done all of the prep work, you've done the procedure itself, and now you're just there, being monitored and having tests done and stuff like that. And you were a part of a trial, so How did they treat you? I mean, did they treat you like royalty or something?
I mean, everyone was really nice from the beginning. From the first time I walked in to the doctor's office, my mom and my husband, like I said, was there with me. And I think you have to have some type of sort of trust in order, because, like you said, it is a study. So when I first met Dr. Sharaf and his nurse practitioner, Mary Ann, you have to feel a trust. You have to feel comforted and know that no matter what, that they're going to fight for you. And I'm not just a walking science project,
Right.
And sometimes, I guess some people could feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
But they made me feel so comfortable. They made me feel so like they had my back, like they were fighting with me. So I never felt alone in this. So I think that helped tremendously. And my mom, like I said, she's a really strong individual, and she put Dr. Saraf through the ringer. She asked her so many questions. So what are you going to do for my daughter? What if this happens? Are you going to be there? And she just sat there and answered every question, and it didn't break a sweat. And he hit my husband and Dr. Saraf on the joke, saying, wow, you must have had a tough time dating her, because her mom is tough. And so, yeah, he just stayed calm, and, he stayed cool, and, any questions I had, he gave me his email, his phone number, and said, if you think of something in the middle of the night, write it down, call me and ask me, and I'll answer. If I don't have the answer, I'll find it for you. So that makes you feel comfortable that, hey, I'm putting my life in your hands, and you want to know that they'll go to bat for you, and that's what I felt.
By the way, do you know how many other patients, were there any other patients going through the study at the same time you were, that you were aware of?
At the same time, I'm not sure about the same time. I do know there was some before me.
Okay, yeah.
I believe I was maybe number, I want to say 10 or 11 at that time. Every time I go back, I always ask, well, how many people do you have now? And they always say, we receive calls from all over the world, Africa, Saudi Arabia, Jamaica,
Yes.
People calling in, they want this. And I was lucky enough to go through this, so, it makes me feel amazing. But I always ask, so how many you have now? And I believe they're up to 20, a little bit over 20 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're also doing the half match as well.
Right.
So you can have a half sibling.
Right.
Or one of your parents who can be a donor as well.
Okay. Kamia, most of the transplant centers require patients to stay near the hospital for about the first 100 days or so, meaning you can't leave town and stuff like that. Was that the case with you, too?
Absolutely. So I'm not too far from Chicago,
Right.
around 40 minutes depending on traffic. And so, like I said, for the first 2 weeks, I stayed with my mom. So when my husband was out of town for business, so my mom would drive me, or she'd get one of my siblings would volunteer, my best friends would volunteer to drive me over that way. And then after, when I returned home, my husband would drive me at first, I believe it was twice a week, so maybe the first month or so.
Okay.
Just so they can monitor you closely. Anything that they thought, didn't look right, or hey, you're getting this infection, let's put you on a different antibiotic, or hey, you need some fluids, or, anything that they just wanted to be sure that everything was on the right track. And, I understand totally, because, like I said, I went through a lot of this with my life. So.
Okay. Now here is the million-dollar question, maybe not a million, but most sickle cell stem cell transplants, and as well cancer stem cell transplants, can be quite expensive. Do you know how much did yours cost? And did you have insurance that covered it?
So I believe the cost was somewhere around $120,000, which is extremely a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
For someone who would pay out of pocket. However, I did have insurance.
Okay.
And so what the hospital or the transplant, I'm not sure exactly who contacted my insurance company. I guess they did a special request, because this was not, a life-sustaining treatment. This is something a little extra, above and beyond. But eventually
Right.
So that's one of the two biggest things, that you have to have a match. And the second thing is your insurance has to approve it, or you have to come up with $120,000. And not very many people should have $120,000 just laying around.
Well, yeah, and especially people that are affected by sickle cell. For real, for real. So, so your insurance company, was it a hassle, or I mean, once it was, well, like you said, you think that the center or the hospital or the transplant team or whoever it was working with your insurance company, but was it a hassle to get them to say yes or not?
You know what? It took a while for the insurance to respond. That was one of the things we were waiting on. Like, I was going through the workup because I had to be healthy enough to, go through the stem cell process. They had to do X-rays, EKGs, all these scans and blood work to make sure that I was healthy enough
Right.
to sustain this. And while they were testing my siblings' blood, that's what we were waiting on. We were waiting on the insurance company to say it to go. So that took that was probably the longest process, getting the insurance company to say yes. But as soon as they said yes, we were ready to set a date.
Okay. So I'm going to change direction here just a little bit. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that what you did is very brave, and especially knowing that you could face any number of complications afterwards. And did you ever feel like you were being brave, or was it just something that you felt you just had to do, and brave never entered into the picture?
I hear other people say brave, that I'm brave, but I feel like that it was something that I needed to do. I think that my brother was brave for doing the sales without he didn't bat an eye. He didn't ask me any questions. Where do you need me? What is it that you need me to do? I'm there. And I think my husband is brave. He, like I said, would drive me to the hospital at 3 in the morning, would go get my prescriptions from the hospital, would, take care of the kids when I couldn't. So my mom is brave for always being there for me when I was a kid and didn't know what was going on, for being there for my sister and I. So, like I said, my support system is so amazing. I don't feel like I'm brave. I feel like it was just something I needed to do for my family, for my children. I want to be able to see them go to college. I want to meet my grandchildren. And before this, I had accepted the fact that that may not be so. So I was, had already accepted that, hey, you guys, I'm training them, hey, you guys are going to grow up, you're going to have your own kids and go on and live life. And I was thinking, I didn't tell them this, but I was thinking to myself, and I may not be here,
Right.
So I felt like this was something I needed to do to change their lives as well as to change mine.
Okay, that's a good answer. So you're now a few years down the road from that life-changing day in October of 2013. With what you know now, would you have undergone the transplant procedure sooner than you did, if you could have?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I wish I had heard about it a lot sooner. But in Gary and here in the surrounding areas where I've been treated, there's not a lot of information that you hear on the new things that are happening, with sickle cell, the different treatments that they have. Even the hydroxyurea treatment I didn't hear of supposedly it's been out forever, and I didn't hear about it until maybe the past 7-8 years or so, because supposedly it's been around forever. So being in the area that I'm in, we don't hear so much about it. Had it not been for my mom watching the news that night and seeing the brothers receiving the cure there at the University of Illinois, I don't think I would have ever heard of it myself. So I believe it's because of my mom hearing that, and that just set a fire saying, this is for me, I have to do. And the next day I was on the phone.
We didn't talk too much about your brother, so let's go there for a minute. What did he have to do anything special to be able to donate those stem cells to you?
Actually, he did. He had to inject himself, which he's the only a day for 5 days with this medication that would, stimulate his stem cells. They would stimulate his cells so that they would be ready to be taken and collected, I should say. So for 5 days, twice a day for 5 days, he had to use this medication. And he did say that it made his joints sore. And I apologized, like, oh, I'm sorry. Don't, he said, stop apologizing and stop thanking me. You would have done the same for me. So he's not one for me to, continue to say, oh, I can't believe you did this for me. He just, he's so modest that it's like another day for him. But I seriously appreciate everything that he's done. So, that's pretty much all he had to do.
Okay. Well,
5 days, and then after that, on the 6th day, he had to go to the hospital, and that's when they collected the stem cells.
and that too is a procedure that's pretty similar to a blood transfusion, right?
Correct. They hooked him up to, you can either do one or two things. You can have 2 IVs, one in each arm, one to collect the stem cells. It will collect blood, and it will spin in this machine to collect the stem cells, and then the blood will be infused back into his body. But he had a line placed, the central line I was speaking about with the big vein, in your chest.
Right.
And so it just happened all at once. It took blood, it would spin off the stem cells, and the remaining would go back to him. So I remember that morning I took him to the hospital, drove him over there early in the morning, took a couple hours, maybe about 4. He was a little drained after, so I drove him home, and I think he was back to work the next day or the day after.
Oh, okay. So your story has been in the media, including on shows like the Tom Joyner Morning Show. You've appeared at various events and conferences. What is it that motivates you to share yourself the way that you do?
So I feel like it's my job now. I've been given this huge, amazing opportunity to be one of the few who could live without this disease. And it still amazes me to this day that I was the one chosen, that I was the one that was lucky enough blessed enough to have this opportunity. So, as I said again, here where I live, there's not a lot of information that's going about sickle cell. So I feel like it's now my job to share my story, and it hopes and inspire someone else, or maybe give someone else hope, or because like I said, I was at the end. I felt like I had accepted death, which now hearing myself say that, it's just like, wow, I can't believe I was at that point, and look where I am now. But now I feel like it's my turn to share my story, to give hope to others who have no idea of the things that's going on with sickle cell and the new developments. And, I just want to give others hope, because there's not a lot of hope for sickle cell patients. It's like you have the disease, you're going to have it for the rest of your life. There are things they can do to maybe subside the pain once you get into a crisis, but that's about it. There's nothing else that can actually cure the disease that's produced for the mass,
Well, thank you for being who you are, Kamia, and thank you for your willingness to share this story. It's quite impressive, it's quite moving, and it's also uplifting, and we thank you for coming on the show today to talk with us about it. So let's imagine that you have a chance now to talk to a group of adults where they might be candidates for the same procedure that cured you. Based on what you just said about wanting to give hope to others, what would you tell these people if you had the chance to speak with them?
So I tell them that what they're going through, what they're about to go through is going to be scary. You're, of course, the unknown is always a bit nerve-wracking. But imagine your worst crisis, or just imagine any crisis for that matter. What you're going to go through does not even compare slightly that they should use it. That is so worth it. It's so worth having my life back. It's so worth not living with that worry, not living with something holding you back. It's a great feeling. You feel free. You feel light. You feel like you can conquer the world. And it's an amazing feeling.
And you are an amazing lady. Thank you for being with us today. Is there anything else that we haven't covered yet that you would like to put out there?
I want to tell the people who are still, suffering from the disease, who, don't have a message this way, to just don't give up hope. I've been there, and look where I am now. I just want them to keep fighting and believe that there's a better way, that something is going to happen. Because I've just heard so many things that's growing in the sickle cell community, and I really want to be a part of getting that out there to share, some of the things that's going on. And I just want people to not give up hope. I keep fighting, and I know it's hard, and mentally, physically, emotionally, you feel like you're draining on your family, but keep fighting. You are so worth it, and it will be worth it. It will.
And it was definitely worth it to speak with you today, Kamia Quinones, and we're very, very grateful that you did spend your time with us this afternoon. And we're going to be in touch with you. We talked a little bit when we were during break, you and I see things that we might be able to do together, especially since you're in Gary and we're in Indianapolis, so we're pretty close. But you've done a great job today, and I appreciate you doing what you did, and I'm certain our audience appreciates you as well. And hopefully we'll look to see more of you. You could actually go out and start doing commercials for the University of Illinois Hospital, because you are doing a great job of explaining what this is like and how worth it is. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we will talk with you again soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
All right. That was Kamia Quinones from Gary, Indiana, 36-year-old female with sickle cell disease, SS, who was cured with a stem cell transplant in October 2013, coming up on 3 years ago, and she's just been great, a great guest today. So we're going to close the show, actually a few minutes early here today, but we're going to go ahead and close the show. And as always, we do it with a closing quote, and that closing quote is, "I'm actually always looking for the good news." And that was said by someone named Sophie Hawkins. And Sophie Hawkins is an American singer, songwriter, musician, and painter. Her debut album, Tongues and Tales, was released in 1992. It achieved both worldwide commercial success and critical acclaim, earning her a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist in 1993. It doesn't seem to matter where you get your news these days. No matter the source, the news always seems to lead in with the bad and the ugly, hardly ever mentioning the good. Of course, that's because all of the news marketers have decided that bad news sells more copies or generates more clicks than good news. They didn't just pull this out of a vacuum, They came to this conclusion because they have watched and studied humanity closely, and they have determined we seem to like hearing about the bad things that happen to others. Is that because it makes us feel better off than those unfortunate souls who had something bad happen to them? Maybe. But that's a discussion for another day. Anyway, the preponderance of bad news doesn't mean that there isn't any good news out there. It's there. You just have to look a little harder to find it sometimes. This is true with just about anything, and I'm here to tell you that it's true with sickle cell disease too. Yes, there are so many tragic stories in the sickle cell space, but as I keep saying, there are also signs that hope is on the horizon. From where I sit, I can confidently say that we in this community have much to look forward to. As a case in point, I would like to elaborate on one of the news stories that I covered in today's Sickle Cell News Update. I'm speaking about what I think is big-time good news for sickle cell, the fact that the American Society of Hematology held a press conference to release its report on the state of sickle cell. Although the report is full of bad news when it comes to the findings that, surprise, surprise, the state of sickle cell is failing, the good news is that a very large and very influential organization has stepped forward to say that things have got to change. Not only did ASH say that things have to change, they spelled out what things need to be changed. Not only did they spell out what things need to be changed, they took the lead in forming a broad-based coalition of agencies, healthcare institutions, pharmaceutical companies, and others to help address the problems and change the paradigm. That's good news. No, actually, that's really good news. This has the potential to be a real game changer for sickle cell. This good news climbs onto the shoulders of all of the other good things that are currently taking place. There are now more and more smart people having more and more focused meetings on sickle cell more and more often than ever before. Whether it is companies like Mass Therapeutics who are developing drugs, government agencies that are holding focus group meetings, increasing media coverage in months other than September, or more physicians who are encouraging more patients to take hydroxyurea, the trend is obvious. Our world is now more concerned with sickle cell than it has ever been. This isn't news that you will find on the front page of your local newspaper or even on the taglines of most internet news outlets, but it is still happening, and it is all good. If you have sickle cell, or if you are connected to someone with sickle cell, I encourage you to embrace this good news with all of your heart and all of your mind. But don't just embrace it. Get out there and do something to keep this momentum going. If we all do that, the good news will just keep coming, and I promise you, it will keep getting